Paulie.tv here, Paulie Malignaggi here. You know, we've already discussed why certain fights don't happen, the possibilities, some of the politics that get in the way. Maybe it wasn't all of the politics, but it's certainly some of the politics. The never-ending politics in boxing can be frustrating, but we've talked about why certain fights may not happen. Here are some of the fights I want to see happen. First off is a fight that we've been talking about for a while, and for me, is going into the jeopardy, is falling in danger of becoming like Mayweather and Pacquiao, where it winds up happening, but it winds up happening too late. You guys probably know, when I compare it to that, which one it is. Erol Spence against Terence Crawford. It's a fight that has been in demand for a while. It's a fight between two elite level fighters, a welterweight clash for the ages. The welterweight clash of this generation, it seems like every generation has a top welterweight clash. It's been really a golden weight class throughout the decades, each and every generation, or many, at least for most generations. I don't want this fight to start to fall into the category of Mayweather-Pacquiao, where it happens a bit too late and both guys end up fighting it, playing their roles. They're both multimillionaires, and they kind of skill it, but they don't will it. If that makes any sense. And here's the reason I'm going to say that. Mayweather and Pacquiao happened a little bit late, and you can kind of see both guys fought with skill. They're both world-class fighters, but it was never really became a fight, and it's sort of, for the casual, it kind of became a dud. Both guys had cemented their place in history. Both guys were already guaranteed Hall of Famers. It was just a matter of they were making a lot of money. They were going to skill through it. They were gonna put on an exhibition for everybody, and that's sort of what it seemed like to me, and probably to a lot of fans. An exhibition of boxing between two world-class fighters. When Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns fought, it was the biggest fight boxing could make at that time. But they fought in their young primes, early 20s actually. And at that point in their careers, they were both terrific fighters, but neither of them was guaranteed at the Hall of Fame yet. They were both becoming must-watch TV. They probably both were must-watch TV. They were both world champions looking to unify the title. One was a WBC champion and one was a WBA champion at a time when those were the only two belts around. So they fought, and they fought early in their careers, and they fought at a point where there's still a lot to fight for. Not that Mayweather and Pacquiao didn't have a lot to fight for, because they still had the right to who was the fighter of that generation, and the result of that fight probably meant that. But with Leonard and Hearns, you have everything on the line. The undisputed title and the future superstar that's going to carry that particular generation. As a matter of fact, Sugar Ray Leonard won the fight, and he is considered the fighter of that generation. A big reason for that is because of that fight and that win. Now, a little side note, keep in mind, if that fight was 12 rounds like today, Tommy Hearns wins the fight, and history is very different. That's a 15-round fight, and the 15-round era is very interesting, because due to the fact that it was a 15-round fight, Sugar Ray Leonard comes from behind and knocks out Tommy Hearns and wins that magnificent fight that is a fight that we as boxing fans still hold dear in our hearts. And why is it that way? I'll tell you why. When you're young and you have it all still to fight for, those guys have money. Those guys were making already good money. They were champions, but they hadn't cemented their legacy yet. You're still fighting for everything. There's a ferocity you fight with in your 20s that as you enter your 30s and beyond, you've got a lot of experience and you can skill things, but you lose that ferocity. And that ferocity is what makes the fights fun. That ferocity is what keeps fans on the edge of their seat, like, wow, what an exchange. As you get older, you learn to avoid those kind of wow exchanges. You learn to pick your spots a little better, be a little smarter. You're an older fighter, and you gotta kind of, you don't want to take that kind of damage, even in a fight you're gonna win. So you look to fight in a different strategic manner. Well, when you're young, you have strategy, it's been taught to you, but there's a ferocity inside you. You want to just be the best, and you don't care what you have to go through. And those guys, the reason that fight was so excellent is because they fought at a point in their careers where they were still looking for that. They still had that inside them, that ferocity, that mean streak, that dogged determination that nothing was going to get in their way, because they were both evenly skilled, and it was going to take a lot of will as well. So it's skill and will, as opposed to once you're older, where it's just a lot of skill, like what we saw in the Mayweather and Pacquiao fight, and that kind of left us hungering for excitement. So I hope to watch Spence and Crawford while they still have that ferocity, because we're starting to get to the point where they're going to start losing it soon. Right now, I see Spence and I see Crawford when they fight, they still kind of have it. But I don't think in the next couple of years, if you keep giving these guys multi-million-dollar paydays on top of each other consistently, multi-million-dollar paydays, they keep winning, that they're going to have this same ferocity by the time they get in the ring with each other. I hope we get to see this fight soon. Who would win the fight? When we first started talking about this fight with Spence and Crawford, my pick was Spence. I picked with Spence. I thought he was a naturally bigger guy, and although I thought Crawford was more talented overall, I thought the size of Spence would overcome that, because Spence is still super talented himself, an ex-Olympian, can box, has a lot on his side. I don't know, maybe it's the injury to Spence, maybe it's I see Crawford getting better and better and looking better and better. Possibly the performance against Porter was a better performance, the best performance against Sean Porter than I've seen out of any of the welterweights. My pick is now Terence Crawford. I do want to see Errol Spence at least in one fight coming back off of the eye injury before he gets a chance to fight Terence Crawford. I just hope the fight happens at all. But if I had it my way, I'd like to see Spence get one fight back before they fight each other. And then I do hope they fight each other, because like I said, the sand is running out of the hourglass. If you have the fight too late, it's not going to be that much fun. That's my prediction. Going off guys in their 20s, you know, I'd love to see certain young guys take each other on. I'd love to see a fight with Teofimo Lopez and Gervonta Tank Davis. You know, Teofimo came up short now. Kambosos is a fun fighter. Teofimo still has that explosive reputation. Gervonta has that explosive reputation, and both guys with that explosive reputation in the ring with one another can be dynamite. And I'd love to see it happen. I think it's a fan-friendly fight. Styles do make fights, and for that reason, despite the loss Teofimo had, because of Styles making fights, I think that's can't miss TV. You know, two guys who have huge one-punch power, two guys who can hurt you at any point, and two guys who have good boxing skills. You know, we think about Lopez and we think about Gervonta, we think about some of their devastating knockouts, but those guys can fight. It's not just the power, those guys can fight. And I want to see them fight each other. I want to see the whole thing come together. You know, if anybody can set the trap to land the big shot on the other one, because they both have that dynamite power, but at the same time can really play chess in there with you, you know? And we saw that with Teofimo's ability to box against Lomachenko when Teofimo was on like that. And we saw, you know, even Gervonta Davis having to go 12 rounds, and Isaac Pitbull Cruz, who I thought, you know, brought more to the table than Gervonta bargained for. And Gervonta boxed very well in that fight. You know, he had to work his way through it, but he won the fight, and he boxed very well, boxed very intelligently. So I think that's a fun matchup to watch, and possibly it can be something. I wouldn't mind seeing, you know, speaking of guys in their 20s, you know, even Josh Taylor against Teofimo Lopez. George Kambosos is in the mix, he's still in his 20s. You know, I think all these guys fighting each other, Devin Haney, you know, with Kambosos as well. I just want these guys all to fight each other when they're still young. I'll even take early 30s, guys. You know, Spence and Crawford are in their early 30s now. I'll take anything. Just do it while you're young, guys. Do it while you're young, while you're mean, while where us fans can really look forward to that dogged determination coming into the fight and being shown in the fight, and not just a battle of skills, which we appreciate, but we also thirst for violence. Another fight that I'd love to watch, and you know what? It was more talked about a couple of years ago, but I still think it would be a fun fight. And sometimes you want to see fights because styles make fights. And because of styles making fights, there'll always be fun fights, regardless of the records, or regardless of at what point in their careers those guys are at, right? For me, the fight that I want to see a lot, despite where they're at in their careers now, is Deontay Wilder against Anthony Joshua. It's a fight between two huge punchers, two very popular heavyweights, a fight that everybody has talked about, be it in boxing and outside of boxing, so they're clearly easily recognizable names. The rivalry, they've kind of been in each other's orbit for so long. The rivalry developed. It never got settled in the ring. There was so much talk, so many alleged offers, who knows what it was, you know? Guys on both sides saying they made an offer and they were turned down. Who knows what the truth was, who knows what made up was. Then the fans of both guys saying, no, that was the real offer. No, it wasn't the real offer. I remember some kind of $50 million cash offer on the table, allegedly given by Deontay's team, and Joshua was the one who sold more. It was a bigger star in terms of, you know, pay-per-view sales in England and asses in seats, so he was saying, nah, he deserves a lion's share of the money. All that posturing and what happened, they both got themselves beat, and now people aren't talking about it as much. But that doesn't mean that it's not a great fight. To me, styles make fights, and to me, and to you, you guys know styles make fights. If you're watching this, you're a boxing fan, you know styles make fights. Wilder and Joshua was a great fight for me. You don't have to have the belts on the line. Regardless of if AJ is able to beat Usyk in the rematch or not, I want to see AJ take on Deontay Wilder before they're a little bit too far past their primes. I'm starting to think they're edging on the end of their primes. But I think two great punchers with big reputations, big fan bases, both with a lot of notoriety. I think it's a great sell on both sides of the planet, on both sides of the Atlantic. I love to see that fight. regardless of where they're at in their careers. I just hope it doesn't happen when they're a little bit too old. So let's see Wilder and Joshua. That's a fight I want to watch. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, because it's not a fight where you would even have a title on the line. It's not a fight where there's pound for pound stipulations on the line anymore. But as we say before, styles make fights, and I think this fight is can't miss in terms of excitement. My pick for who wins, I always picked Deontay Wilder, because I thought that Anthony Joshua's lack of head movement put him in the line of fire for straight punches. We saw Klitschko drop him, even though AJ came back roaring and knocked him out. I think Joshua being a little bit stiff, good guard, solid stance, but a little bit stiff, was a little bit susceptible to straight punches. And Wilder's best asset, his best shot, is that straight right hand, and he hides very well behind the jab. So I thought that Wilder would beat AJ. But at this point in their careers, I don't know what each one has left coming off the losses they've come off of. Sometimes it's a matter of confidence. Sometimes it's a matter of your psyche is a little bit down or up. It's hard to predict. You know, you can't really predict how a guy's going to come back off of certain parts of his career, off of certain fights. Wilder's taken some bad beatings in the trilogy with Fury. Despite, you know, the third fight being excellent, it was still a physically debilitating fight. The second one was a physically debilitating fight. So I don't know what he's going to come back with. So it's hard to say for sure who I think would win, because they're not the same kind of fighters that they were when I was first predicting this fight. When I was first predicting this fight, I thought Wilder was my pick. I guess I kind of have to go that way because that was my pick, but depending on, you know, what each guy has left, I can't really say for sure. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised no matter who I pick if I was wrong. I just want to see the fight. That's another reason I want to see the fight. If you have a matchup where you can't tell who the winner is going to be definitively, don't you want to see it? I mean, that's the kind of fight you want to see. You know, I don't constantly want to watch fights where I know who's going to win already. I want to watch fights where going in, I may think this guy's going to win. You might think the other guy's going to win. I may just be undecided and really on the fence. And, you know, you got to hold a gun to my head to make sure that, you know, I make a choice, you know? I want to see that fight, bro. I want to see that fight. All right, let's make Wilder and Joshua happen before these guys pass their prime. Another fight I want to see is Jake Paul versus a real boxer. You know, there's a lot of talk, right? I mean, Jake Paul, they were talking about Chavez Jr. I personally think Chavez Jr., you know, probably still beats Jake Paul. I think Jake Paul was having trouble against Tyron Woodley until he knocked him out. I don't know that he's necessarily ready for a real boxer. If anything, he definitely can't take on a guy in his prime. Chavez Jr., prime or no prime, really was never that good, but I still think he's better than Jake Paul. He did win a world championship legitimately, and you know what? He's got wins over guys like Andy Lee and Peter Manfredo. So you know what? He's not that bad either. I mean, I'm criticizing the guy, but he wasn't that bad either, right? Despite looking really bad in some fights. I think he's too much because he's also got the size. You know, he's a big guy. I think Jake Paul always likes to fight smaller guys, and Chavez Jr. might be smaller than Jake Paul, but who knows? The way Chavez Jr. shows up, he might not be smaller than Jake Paul. You know, he might be, you know, big enough to give Jake Paul a lot of problems, because at the end of the day, he has been at world-class level in boxing. If he's going to fight a real boxer, I think it's going to be an older guy, obviously, as they've all been a little older. Despite the non-boxers he fought, they've all been a little bit older. But he needs to fight a guy with some notoriety. You know, a guy, he can't just be an older guy who nobody's ever heard of, right? So he's always fought smaller guys, so the boxer would definitely have to be smaller if the other guys that he's fought have been smaller, right? So a little bit older, a little bit smaller. A boxer's probably going to hit Jake Paul a little bit more because he's going to know how to set up punches, so you don't want him to be too big of a puncher, because let's face it, Paul is the star here. You know, you want to make sure you kind of groom the star the right way in fights where he's at risk, but he's going to be able to win the fight. So, you know, we've got a little bit older, a little bit smaller, going to hit him, so maybe not the biggest puncher. Paulie Malignaggi. Out of all these fights that I just mentioned, the one that probably has the biggest chance of happening, I think, you know, people are still talking about it a lot, and now Erol Spence is going to return to the ring. I don't think these fights have a great chance of happening, any of them. I mean, let's face it. I mean, they're all long shots. They're fights a little bit desirable, but if you really think about it, that's why they're desirable, because they're hard to come by, right? But I think Spence and Crawford if I had to pick one to say that's the best chance to happen. You know, Terence Crawford now is a free agent, so he can kind of move around in his own way and kind of go in his own direction, and he's more free to negotiate a fight with Errol Spence without having to overcome promotional hurdles, network TV hurdles. And Errol Spence is going to come back from the eye injury. I like to see him in a comeback fight where we make sure the eye is good, because that was a bad injury and we want to make sure that he's healed right and how he looks coming back from that injury. But if he comes back and he looks good, maybe Terence Crawford can sit ringside for the fight. You can make that fight. I think that has the best chance of happening. Out of all the fights mentioned, I think Errol Spence versus Terence Crawford is the fight that has the best chance of happening in 2022, and I hope we see it. Unless Jake Paul wants to smoke.